Hello. Hi there. How are you guys doing today? Thank you. Thanks for attending. My name is Vic Ekamaram. I've been with Tableau about 4 years. I started out on the sales side, and then for a couple years I was working with some of our larger partners like Accenture and Deloitte. And this year I'm part of the customer advocacy program. We work with some of our largest customers, and our basic goal is to help our customers adopt the software and maximize the value that they get from it. So this topic about enterprise adoption is near and dear to me. I've seen many different aspects, how the partners do it, how our large customers do it. And we've got a twist on it today, and that's going to be talking about how you can use data to drive adoption. So thank you for coming, and look forward to the next hour.
Yeah, my name's Tim Nicknish. I'm also a member of the Customer Advocacy Manager. I've been with Tableau about 3.5 years. And again, one of the original members of the Customer Advocacy role. So just working with enterprise accounts, trying to understand what their adoption is, how they're doing it, and helping share best practices across the different clients we work with. So really today's kind of a summary of what we've really learned working with our clients together, and hopefully have some great tidbits for you going forward. So just a couple of items when it comes to adoption. There's other sessions you may be interested in. My schedule kept changing, so ISMO is presenting right now, so I'm glad you're here with us instead. But after the session, these will all be posted on the web, and you can catch theirs. Also, the federal government, they've had some explosive adoption on their side, so they're presenting their use case later this afternoon, or I guess that's tomorrow. And then tomorrow we also have one of Tableau's greatest speaking on adoption and how governance plays a role. So obviously governance is a huge topic for a lot of folks, and with the proper governance that can certainly lead to greater adoption. So again, we appreciate you showing up for our session today. So a little bit on the agenda, to give you a little background. When we look at this, we look at it as like we want to make sure clients get a return on their investment. You made a significant investment in Tableau. We want to make sure you're getting that value out of it. Make sure you continue to renew your maintenance so you can get the latest releases and also just continue to grow. So with that, we feel adoption is pretty important, right? The more people who are actually using the software will lead to easier returns on the investment. And today's session is really about, okay, we want to have adoption, but what kind of adoption do we have? And do we have good quality adoption? So we're going to discuss today a lot of the different metrics that can help drive that. And like I said, hopefully give you some good action items coming out of that. So we'll go through the different classifications of adoption metrics. So on desktop and server, I think those are pretty obvious ones, but also on community and value. So we feel if you combine all these together, it could be a much more compelling impact for centers of excellence, for executives who sponsor this, and really help out the folks in the room who are in charge of these type of activities. And then lastly, we're going to throw a lot of information at you, a lot of good ideas. We're going to boil it down to a couple of key takeaways that you can start acting on immediately. There's sample vizzes I've already posted up to the community sites, and lots of great ways for you to interact with your Tableau account team to maybe get some of the data you may not have access to, but we do, and how that can jointly work best.
Thank you. So, considering you're at the Tableau conference, I don't think anybody would disagree with this statement that we are data people. That being said, what Tim and I have noticed in working with our largest customers is that when it comes to adoption and leveraging data to actually drive that adoption, we all have a blind spot. So it's a funny story. So I have 2 kids. That's Emil on the right, my right, your right, and Yannick. So they're 14 and 9. And I don't know about you, those of you who have kids, there's always certain things that are common arguments in your house. And so at our house, it's usually about eating habits. So my wife and I want them to eat something healthy, and obviously they don't want to eat healthy food. And as I was preparing for this session, I've always thought of myself as a very data savvy person. I would consider myself to be a data person. And funny thing is, that for most of my work-related problems, I'll always ask that question, how can I use data to do this better? How can I leverage data? But this was one where we're constantly arguing about why they don't eat good food. And I noticed that rather than using data to kind of convince my kids, I would get into the standard, we've cooked this food for you. it's healthy, it's good for you, and you have to eat it. And they'll always do this and be like, no, we're not eating it, and we go back and forth. And so it was just funny for me that there are these blind spots where sometimes it's just really hard to use data to get what you want. So before we get started, we just wanted to do a kind of quick show of hands, want to understand what roles people play in this audience with us. So how many of you here either manage the Tableau server or Tableau server admins or kind of manage the Tableau shared service? Good, I would say about maybe a third of the room. How many of you develop dashboards? You know, would consider yourselves, you know, analytics providers. You're building dashboards either for yourself or for somebody else. Okay, and then how many of you actually are responsible for enabling your Tableau community?
Oh, cool.
Great. Keep your hands up for the Tableau community. How many of you are actually paid to do this, and you're not doing this out of the goodness of your heart, they're not volunteers? If you could just, the ones who are actually paid to do this. So, okay, so there's about, you know, I would say maybe 40% of the people who are actually enabling the community tend to be, you know, or have a formal role to do that. So that's great. Are there any other roles in the audience? Can you guys just quickly shout out?
Just lead the COE.
Lead the COE, okay. Sponsor, I heard? Governance. Executive development. Awesome. So, you know, we've got most of the people in those three audiences. This topic is obviously relevant to a much broader set of people. So one thing that stands out is that this is the change which needs to happen as you look at, so if you're managing the Tableau server, if you're building dashboards for somebody else, if you're managing the community, we are all service providers. We're either providing that Tableau server as a service, an infrastructure as a service, or we are providing analytics as a service, or we are providing a community and enablement as a service. The thing is, we don't think of it or don't think of ourselves as service providers. And as I was putting together this slide, I had this brilliant aha moment because I turned to my wife and I said, "Hun, we provide parenting as a service to our kids, and you should probably go and ask them about their feedback and how good a job we're doing." Obviously, that didn't go too well. I got whacked on the head. My wife was like, "We are parents. This is not a service." But, and we're not providing food as a service, and they get to choose whether they like it or not. They get to eat what we provide them. Anyway, so that was just a funny aside. But the fact of the matter is, we are service providers, and there are people who are consuming these services that we provide. So how can we actually make these services in a way that people want to consume them? And that's really what we get into when we talk about adoption metrics. So the categories that we are going to talk about today, obviously there's Tableau Desktop, and we want to talk about how can you look at adoption of Tableau Desktop across your enterprise. There is Tableau Server, and we want to talk about, how is Tableau Server getting adopted? If you are managing the shared server, are you doing the right things to make sure that server adoption is going up? Those two are easy. The next two are tough. The community as a service is much, much tougher. A lot of you are doing this, as part-time volunteers. Some of you are actually paid to do it. There isn't a lot of data that you can actually get. With the server and desktop, you could get some data, but there is not much data on the service that you're providing to your community. And then the last thing, which I think gets forgotten a lot, is what is the value of these services that we are providing? Can we quantify it? Because at the end of the day, all this comes back to somebody needing to make an investment at an executive level that you've got to go make this justification to. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll take these 4 categories and spend a lot of time with you just going through what are the different types of metrics that our customers are doing. What do we think you should be thinking about? So Tim?
All right. I have 2 teenage daughters, so my children are not in this presentation because they would kill me if I did that. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is desktop metrics. So who here is familiar with the customer portal where we actually store keys when you buy software from us? Who here uses that to assign keys, track it, and pay attention to it? Who thinks it's fun? Wow, all right, we have one. Brave. So one of the first questions we want to simply ask is, are you over, under, or fully utilized in what you've acquired? So these are just some simple metrics that you can actually run off of your portal extract, off of your portal, dump that data out, run a viz on it, just to simply figure out you bought X, you've deployed Y, What's the gap? What kind of shelfware are we looking at? Shelfware, I would argue, is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you get finance who bought 10, and marketing says, I need one, and finance says, go buy your own. So there could be some shelfware there because finance doesn't want to give it up. But it's also just kind of understanding, like, where do you sit today? There's some other metrics you could do where your correlation between who you assigned it to and who's actually using it. That always gets fun to try and figure that out. And that kind of leads to the other stuff that goes on within the portal. As you know, from a EULA perspective, everyone's allowed 2 installs. The idea, one on Mac, one on PC, one at home, one at work. But in reality, we know interns come in, projects roll in, roll off, and people are transferring keys. So we have the ability, again, if you work with your Tableau team, to understand where is this key being used, who are the names, what are the dates. And a lot of it's just for your own sanity, so you understand who actually is your active user base as of today. Part of the challenges with the portal that we mentioned is the last person to register wins, and that's the only name you're going to see in the portal. So little icon on the bottom right, that's my homemade or custom viz. So the idea is you can work with your account team, they can get that information for you if that's something you're interested in. All right, so the other thing is, are you keeping track within the portal? That information's there as well. Are they keeping current on maintenance? So quick show of hands, how many people track your versions that are out there in the field? Okay, the simple one there is, if they're on version 8, they're probably not an active user, or at least they're not paying attention very much. So that's a good way to, if you need to go harvest keys or reassign keys, keep an eye on those. So again, another custom viz, this is really just taking portal data that you all have access to and really just tracking what version are they on and the like, and what those percentages look like. If you do an upgrade, obviously you want to make sure those people get upgraded right away. Inversely, if people are jumping ahead of your server, you want to make sure you don't get any confusion there, because as we all know, desktops can't publish to to an older server, at least until 10.4. So some new changes there. So again, just some great ways to find out, are they active? And then if they're active, are they staying current? Because obviously the more usage they're going to have, the better. And then simply finding out, are they active, right? So who in the room has turned on the new version 10 desktop reporting capabilities that we turned on? So just a few show of hands. So those who don't know, what you can do, a lot of organizations who have installed packages of Tableau Desktop, you can put some extra lines of code in there. In the Windows world, it updates your registry. And what it'll do is it'll call home, and home being a Tableau server database table. All that's going to do then is just say, hey, Tim fired up Tableau version 10.2, and here's today's date. So that's a new capability we have. This is, again, this is my out-of-the-box view. So these are pre-built vizzes you have access to. So if you turn on that feature, what you can see here is who's used Tableau in the last 90 days. Simple viz. Obviously, you can go customize these to your heart content, but at least you can see what your active user base is with your Tableau desktops. And then on the bottom, maybe more importantly, is who hasn't used it in the last 90 days. And again, there may be legitimate reasons for that, but again, it's just something to keep an eye on and some interesting data you can have about how and who's leveraging your Tableau desktop servers. So again, out-of-the-box reporting, assuming you turn on that feature. If you do turn on that feature, it's really easy if you have the package to install. If not, your IT teams can work to go do those settings to make that updated. If there's more information on that, just Google Tableau desktop reporting. You'll find all the knowledge base articles. All right, so this is an interesting one. So you have active users, they're staying current, you know, they're actively using it on a day-to-day basis, but where do they sit in your organization? So how many people have actually taken their registration data and mapped it to your HR data? Alan, your hand goes up. So this is an interesting exercise to really just understand, you have all these Tableau desktops, who's using them? What business units are using them? And the reason I want to do this is so I can help the COE leads that I work with to say, you need help. There is so many different activities you can do to build a thriving organization of Tableau desktop and server users. I could keep you and the 3 people you can't afford to hire busy for the next 6 months. So you need help, and where are we going to get help? Well, we're going to go get help from the people who are getting benefit from Tableau. So when you start mapping that exercise, you know which VPs to target, to say, hey, we need help, whether it's training, whether it's, we want to have some doctor sessions set up and we want to bring in professional services or a partner. Those are the people who should be helping foot the bill, because obviously IT and the COE budgets are extremely limited. So it's always good just to kind of plot out where those those folks sit within the HR. All right, so we have our next viz, which is custom. And the idea here is we can track on our side, and EU privacy laws aside, we have the ability to share to say, these are where your desktops sit, broken out by different BUs. And then I've blended that in with our Salesforce data where we track if one of you goes and watches a training video, we're tracking that. And so then I can blend that up and I can say, hey, at least I can tell you what percentage of your desktop users have taken at least one class. And you can obviously expand upon that. Maybe they need to watch 10 videos. So again, it's kind of interesting. And like I said, now I can go back to supply chain and sales and say, you've got all these desktops, and from what I can tell, no one's leveraging the 100 free training videos on Tableau's website. Why is that? Can you help me market to those people to say, hey, if you need help, go here, because there's some free, invaluable resources we want to make sure you're leveraging. So really interesting stuff once you start blending in that HR data. Taking that to the next level, learning management system. So who here has Tableau training inside their LMS system, as we call it? Okay, so that's another great data set to bring in and just do the same type of blending that we had before. So now we know where properly trained, i.e. paid training, has taken place within the business. And again, we can go have conversations with sales because they refuse to train their people. Again, we all just want people to be successful. We want you to leverage the most of that investment. Obviously, training is a great way to ensure that happens. So again, that LMS data is a great resource as well. All right, eLearning. This is a product we just came to market with back in May. Anyone here going head wild on eLearning yet? Okay, just a few. This is a perishable item, as I call it. When you buy eLearning, one user can get access to Desktop 1, Desktop 2 for a period of 12 months. So it's perishable. If you bought it, let's make sure you're using it. It's a custom viz, work with your Tableau account team, and we can at least tell you what your burn rate is on the licenses you acquired. So again, it's great that you made the investment in training, but if you don't use it, then it's a complete waste. So again, we have that ability to track all that, and another great metric to keep an eye on. All right, this is one of my favorite. It's hot off the presses. Just finished this last week working with one of my clients. But we took the registration data. We took the training data from their LMS system. We did a survey, which we'll get into in a little bit later. We pulled all the end users of where do they need help and who do they go to for help. And then we also had their HR data. So we use this one for a couple of different reasons I explained earlier, where to go get help within the business, because those are the business users getting the most benefit from all those desktops. But I also kind of changed that a little bit and said, well, let's say a new user comes into the finance team and their boss says, yeah, use Tableau. And they're like, what is Tableau and what do I do with it? So we built out this viz. We blended in their HR data. So now we can see which, and you can do this by BU. So I can say, all right, if I'm in this BU manufacturing site number 1, I can click on that and it'll give me a list of all the Tableau desktop users in that organization. Going below, maybe they just want to look at by management chain. So when we did that blending of HR data, I've got 5 levels of management chain above that person. So again, I can go have conversations with head honcho number 1 and saying, you've got the majority of Tableau desktop. You need to be supporting the COE. You need to fund these type of initiatives. Maybe we just need you to send an email to get the community kind of kick-started, or maybe you need to start awarding people who are doing high value add activities with Tableau. Again, we're trying to build that excitement, build that engagement with the community, and the more marketing we can get from the business leaders, the better. And then lastly, down here, this is where we blend it in. And for those who can't read it, it says, I'm a power user. So they're a self-proclaimed guru, or they've been identified in the field as a super user. Either they've been trained, so we blended in that training data to say, yes, I've been trained, or they're simply a new user. But now, with the click of a button, I can just say, email your new friend, and we can start connecting people so they can get help. Again, this is one of my favorite ones because we're just blending all sorts of data, really trying to drive that collaboration across the organization. So thank you, Alan and team, for doing all that for us. All right. Oh, and that's the quick email link. All right, server metrics. So obviously there's tons and tons of server admins or admin views available today just right out of the box. Who here has gone so far as replicating their Postgres database into a different data set and then built custom views off of that so you can then open it up to your server admins, project leads to run their own analysis on server activity? Okay, few people. Probably I'd recommend it as a best practice. So then the next question would be, if you haven't done that, that's fine, but who at least has opened up those views so other people can come view them? All right, so the whole point is, I may be a site admin, I've got a team of 10 developers and they're creating content. We should really be paying attention to, are people actually looking at that content? Is it being utilized? Is it valuable? So a lot of that is just making sure you're aware of all the views that are up there. There's some backdoor hacks to go grab those views and then turn them into like desktop versions, and then you can go modify to your heart's content. So we recommend you do that as well. But there's just lots and lots of views up there, and we want to make sure you make them available to your site admins and your project admins so they understand that. So end user server usage, this is just a straight out-of-the-box view. How many people are on your server? Right? This is information, that if we don't work with you, we have no idea, we being Tableau, because this is all housed off of your Postgres database. So this is just a simple out-of-the-box viz to figure out what does my daily, weekly, monthly activity look like for unique users. If you're on an interactor, you can figure out how many are active or licensed versus acquired, right? So you may have some shelfware there. That's another easy metric for you to run. But again, just to try and understand what the trends are. The way I look at this is the COEs are always trying to promote all the great things you're doing to support the broader community. That's a great way to advertise all the great things you're doing when you can show some vizzes that show your population's going up and up and up. All right, so this is also just a twist on what we did before. Has anyone ever mapped their server users to the HR database? All right, awesome. Again, another very simple thing to do, but it just allows you to, I think I screwed up my things there, but another just great resource to figure out, all right, we know where the desktops are, but we usually have 10x, 20x more people on server. Let's figure out where those folks reside in the organization, again, so we can go have those conversations with the right VPs to get more help. These are just, again, more out-of-the-box views from the server admins. So really understanding who's viewing the most, which projects are being viewed the most, which views are being viewed the most, all those types of just interesting metrics. And we really just encourage that you share this with your team. One, this is a great way to reward and recognize people that, hey, you're doing great work, you got a lot of people looking at your stuff, and it's just a simple way to kind of make it fun and drive that overall community engagement. When you look at the server, another interesting metric may be, well, what are they looking at? So these are, again, out-of-the-box views looking at the different published data sources. So from here, what data sources are being viewed, how much, how little, right? If you built it and no one's looking at it, especially if it's an extract, why you're refreshing it. That kind of gets into the whole day-to-day server admin capabilities to make sure performance is good. But it may be interesting to understand, well, these data sources are really popular. Well, why is that? Right? It could be that they've built the metadata layer around the data source that they published to server, so it's got predefined calculations. It's got user-friendly business names applied to it. Those are all type of best practices you want to do. And again, the easier it is to use the tool, the more users that will come on and consume the Tableau server. So again, just great out-of-the-box server admin views. All right, for those who are doing a lot of the Postgres server reporting, you probably know that we truncate those tables on 183 days by default. So how many people have actually taken some records out of that and then tracked it even longer than that? All right, excellent. So this is just a custom viz. My source for this is an Excel file, but I simply just track what does at every quarter I try and track with all my clients, what's your active server user count on your Tableau server? And then just mapping that out so we can see a trend line over multiple periods. Because by default, if you go to Postgres directly, it's 183 days. So again, pretty interesting. Hopefully the trend is always going up, but you can see where you have spikes, maybe new projects rolled on and the like. But pretty straightforward stuff to get longer term visualization. All right, this one I refer to as the popularity contest. So this goes back to who's publishing and then who's getting the most views and the most number of unique users. This is out of the box. I've downloaded it and then customized it for my own purposes, but this is just a default server admin view. But I use this for a number of reasons. One, we'll get into later where the value metrics and the use cases. So I go after these folks because they're being viewed, right? So there's a lot of unique users, but I also look at the server hits and try to figure out if there's any correlation between, you may have a ton of unique users, but they're not really doing anything with it. My fear is they're creating what I call look and leave dashboards. And users come in, they look, and they leave. Hey, great, if that's the value they're getting and they're happy with it, that's good. But as we all know, the value of Tableau is, I need to dig into this dashboard. I need to know that I can dig into this dashboard as an end user. So who are the people creating this content? And then again, circling back with them and saying, why? Oh, well, it's a sales rep quota dashboard. They have to. OK, that makes sense. In working with other clients, they said, well, I don't have time, but have you seen this? And they sent me a 97-page PDF file. A little overkill in my mind. But it was all the training on the actual dashboard. And to me, that was just really impactful because I have a feeling a lot of you, not a lot of you, but a lot of folks may take 3 weeks, build this beautiful dashboard, and then say, hey, team, here it is, and they send a URL out. And that's it. So what I found in a couple of my clients is they had spent an exhaustive amount of time documenting what does this dashboard do? What does it not do? Where's the data come from? What's the data flow? What's the business logic that's been applied? All that stuff that's critical when you pop open a URL, you'd like to know that kind of background. I didn't think it was a coincidence that the most popular workbooks had the most extensive training behind them. So again, the idea here is to find out who's doing it, also reward them, as I said before. A lot of times they don't know this. They're not working with their site admins on a day-to-day basis. Half the time people are like, this is awesome. Like, I had no idea this many people were looking at my stuff. Again, we're trying to build that enthusiasm. So really great, great tool to do that. So here I mentioned before mapping your server users to that HR database. So hopefully the numbers are tenfold numbers of what we saw before on desktop. But again, really interesting stuff because we want to go back and have those conversations with the right business leaders to ask for help. And help isn't always money. Maybe it's more resources. Maybe it's allocation of time of a particular resource. But it's like your group is getting a lot of benefit from this Tableau thing we have, and we want to make sure you're aware. And it's also a great way to promote yourself, right? You're providing a service, and these are great metrics that you want to be able to share to your business leaders. All right, WebEdit. Quick show of hands. Who's gone all the way to the end with WebEdit and publishing data sources and letting people go from scratch? Awesome. I mean, a super great capability. It's getting better and better with every release. Well, are you tracking how many people do it? Anyone? All right, so created a custom viz. This is already posted on the community portal. And it's just simple viz. Who's coming in and what are they doing it against? Are they doing it against raw data sources? So they're truly starting from nothing and starting to build content? Or maybe they're taking existing workbooks and riffing on those. So again, just really interesting stuff to figure out who's doing it and what are they doing against it. And also, is it working? Right? I mean, a lot of people don't want to pay for desktop. They want to push them to the server. Totally fine, but let's see if they're doing it. And if not, let's circle back and find out why. Probably training being the most logical reason why people don't. Or there may be legitimate reasons why they need full desktop capability. All right, mobile. Who's got mobile rocking and rolling in their server deployment? OK, a few of you. So another viz, and this is simply tracking by device. So we could actually take this further than mobile. Is it Android? Is it Google? Is it Linux machines somehow running emulation? Is it Apple's? Is it Mac's? Giving you a total breakdown of the type of device that's logging into your server. So pretty interesting stuff. You may have a big mobile launch. No one's launching mobile to look at it. Why not? What's wrong? Maybe it's the VPN issue that everyone has to deal with to get that device on your network. But if you don't know how well it's being used, it's really hard to track how successful your mobile launch was. So again, some great views to understand where mobile's coming into play. So those are just a quick summary of some of the items on desktop and server. And now I'm going to turn over to Vic for community.
Thanks, Tim. So when we started this, I said that there is a blind spot. And if you notice, we see few hands going up. So we've had this hypothesis, how many people are really doing it? And I think we're getting some data from you that some of you are doing this, but for a lot of you, this is new information. If you do think of yourself as service providers, this is going to be critical. And we are seeing this with some of our customers, that they're now looking at Tableau and saying, yes, I manage the infrastructure, I manage the server, people are creating this content. We need to know how this adoption is going along. And especially as your investments in Tableau grow, this becomes more critical. This next part we're going to talk about is going to be a bit more complicated because there is no data. At least with those, the server is generating data that it goes into Postgres. There's desktop data that you can correlate. With the community stuff, this is now definitely an area where you have to put in some effort to collect data. That being said, a lot of people are doing a lot of community activities. So is anybody here tracking like how big your community is and is it growing or not? 1, 2. How many of you have a community of Tableau users in your organization? So a lot of you do have it. And this is where, it's, if you are paid to be a community administrator, it's good to check, is that community growing or not? And so just having that data is critical. And if you're not, this is one of those things where how do you find the time to do it that you have to think about. But it is critical. I mean, you have a community. You need to know, is it growing or not? Are people actually joining it? Are they getting value out of that? Community activities. So this, I hope a lot of you are doing. How many of you do internal Tableau doctor sessions? Some of you. And again, a lot of you are here at the conference. You see the value of people coming and spending time with the Tableau doctors. You have users. They need some help. It's just great to have once a month, once a week, whatever it is, come to this room. We have an expert sitting over there who can answer your questions. Drives adoption like crazy, just giving that help to somebody who's stuck. So if you're not doing Tableau doctor sessions, think about, can you find a couple champions who are willing to volunteer an hour or so, just have them available for some of your other users to come and ask them for help. How many of you do best practices sessions? Maybe once a month you run a webinar for your user groups? A few of you. Again, this is very popular as the community in your organization becomes bigger. People want to know, hey, something new came out in Tableau, 10.4, there's all this new dashboarding stuff. How do I do it? So you can run these kind of 1-hour sessions where you pick a topic. It could be dashboarding best practices, could be level of detail calculations. Get the community in, run that session. Again, everybody in your organization now starts getting value. Tableau days? Anybody doing Tableau days? Few, 3, 4, 5 of you. When I started in Tableau about 4 years ago, this was a very new concept. And I remember one of my customers was a pretty big customer out in the East. And we did the first Tableau day. We had about 200 people from that company come in. It's an all-day session. Typically, in the morning, you have the business users presenting their use cases. And then in the afternoon, we provide some hands-on training. Think of it like your own personal Tableau conference in-house. And we just did the 4th one last month. And we went from about 200 users to about 800 users. And so the community keeps growing. And when we started, we didn't expect it to be big. But some of you that have large Tableau deployments, it's important to create that internal community. We would find groups coming together and saying, hey, I didn't know you were using Tableau. I didn't know you were using it for that. I'm doing the same thing. And then they'd share notes. And so you don't have to bring everybody to the Tableau conference. You can do it in-house. Anybody here doing competitions like whiz contests, hackathons? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Some of you are doing it. Again, as your organization matures, we are now seeing more customers they'll have their own, they'll give a data set to people and say, hey, go create something. Let's see who my champions are. The reason it's important is those competitions highlight your champions. Those champions then become kind of the early adopters within your community. You can use them as doctors to get other people up to speed with Tableau. If you notice, a lot of the theme is around providing that enablement. If you also notice at the conference, the most popular sessions are the training sessions. You saw that as you were coming here, line out of the door, people lining up. It's all about product training. So how are you going to provide that to your users? How many of you have like an intranet site, an online community, Slack forum? Yeah, more of you doing that stuff. Again, great way to get the people together. And the thing is, if you're starting out with Tableau, some of this might not be relevant. But once you get to a certain maturity where you have over 100 users creating content, over 1,000 users consuming content, you have a community. And you've got to start thinking about doing things like this. How many of you know what Makeover Monday is? That's great. A lot more people know Makeover Mondays. So yes, so Makeover Mondays is a weekly data project. It's run by Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray out of Europe. And they basically throw up a data set and they give it to everybody. Anybody can go, get that data set, build their visualization, and then every Monday they get together, critique it, and then they present. This is how you could do it. This is how you could do it. It's a great way to teach people visualization best practices. Again, if you think about it, most people don't have a background in visualization best practices. They've used other tools. And so that's a great opportunity for you to just get your users involved. What we are now seeing, and again, this is taking off in some organizations, is they're doing their own in-house Makeover Mondays. So again, those experts that they have, those champions, then create this Makeover Monday. They'll provide a data set relevant to their organization that they can then use. Anybody doing your own Makeover Monday in-house? No. Okay. Again, I assume if you did this next year, you'll start seeing more people do that. That's what we're seeing at some of our customers. So now that we talked about doing all these events, for those of you who are doing these events, what we've noticed is that we often tend to do these events, but we don't really track are people attending, what's happening. So one of our customers was doing the kind of monthly webinars, and they noticed that the attendance kept going down. And so they didn't know what to do. And we said, why don't we do this? Why don't we set up a registration page? What they were doing initially is they would just go post that, hey, we're doing this Tableau 10.4 session. They'd post it on their intranet site and say, everybody comes to that. They said, let's create a registration page and capture. So they put their information, and they saw that very few people were registering. So when they dug into it, they realized that most people were not coming to the intranet site, or if they did go to it, they didn't have time to go find all this stuff. So they sent out an email to everybody saying, hey, we're going to be doing this event. Please register. By the end of the day, they had over 100 people registered. And when we actually ran the event, we had about 150 people actually attend the event, which was a huge spike in attendance where if they hadn't done that and they hadn't reached out to everybody. So it taught us two things, right? One is there is this huge latent demand in your organization for help, enablement, training. And if you are doing these events, try to reach them out. Don't assume that people will come and see this information on your community sites. And so they then tracked how many people registered versus how many people actually attended. And again, if you are providing this as a service, you should be thinking about why are people registering and not attending? Why are they dropping off? What is it that's going on? And so they then took that data and then started mapping things like, so when they had the registration, they asked people, what team are you from? Which geography are you from? And then they also asked them, what is your skill level? Just kind of self-rate yourself. And all that information then helped them get much more detailed into these groups are getting value. This is the kind of content they want. Actually, people from this geography did not attend because the time was not right. There are so many reasons people don't get in. But once you collect that data, you can then dial in. And you can see that they then compared it and said, we have 1,000 desktop users, and only 100 attended. Why aren't 900 people coming to this? This is free training that should be useful. So then they go back, survey them, find out what it is, what interest they need, make sure that the topics that they created are then relevant. And you can see that kind of attendance over time, that spike that then came up. So again, it's very different. We have to think of ourselves as service providers, and if you're providing that service, we have to track, is it successful? Is it providing value? What can we do different? So the other thing which some of our customers have started doing, and do any of you run surveys with your users to just understand where they need help? 1, 2, some of you, 3. So again, this is something we don't think about. We have end users, we all have busy jobs, but fact of the matter is, do they need training? And one of the things we noticed is when customers do an end user survey, they just reach out to all their desktop users saying, hey, what help do you need? The number one ask is always they want more training. And so this was useful because most customers don't provide that formal training. We've kind of brought up people in this Tableau world of, it's just so easy, download it, go watch the videos, you'll figure it out. And we all know that's not true. There's a reason everybody comes to conference. There's so much to learn, and people need formal training. So we found out that, if people, what training they needed, we also found out, like, are they aware of the resources that are available? So there are communities and organizations doing a lot of stuff, but a lot of people are not even aware of it. And there's tons of stuff coming across our desks, tons of emails. So they realized they actually had a marketing problem of getting to people with that information. Then they, understood from them, like, what challenges do you have? Apart from training, are there other areas you need help? So all this helped them then go back to that user community and say, these are the things you wanted help with. Look, we're now going to create these events, tailor stuff for you.
And this is another great opportunity to use that HR data we talked about earlier, is get your VPs of those different business units to help market the survey. Just get their admin to send out the email to say, IT, COE is trying to help you, Tableau users, please respond. That in itself should drive more participation in the survey. So again, it's a great way to just try to build that network and get a little bit of help from the top down to get people to encourage to respond to the survey.
Now the challenge with this is, obviously there is no data. You can't go somewhere and say, hey, I want some community data. I would love to know what my users care about. So we have to actually do. So what are our customers doing? Some of the customers that we work with. One thing, the registration is becoming more important. So if you're doing an event, create a registration page. Because in that registration page, you can understand, what are the skill levels, where do they come from, what location, what groups they belong to. That metadata helps you then tailor stuff to those people. Most customers in the past would just send out an email invite. The problem with the email invite is then you have to go and somehow figure out who accepted, who did not accept, and it's all sitting in Outlook, and you can't figure that out. If you have a registration page, quickly gets stored somewhere, then you can go analyze it afterwards and say, how do I make this event better? Because you're investing a lot of time and effort to do the event. You might as well, make it actionable. The second thing is more customers are now starting to do polls after the event. So the moment you do an event, and let's say it's a WebEx event, immediately after that, send out a poll. Was this useful? Was this content useful? Could we do anything different? 3 simple questions. People then respond. You've now got information that you can then tailor to provide them something of value. You'll understand why do people not come to the next one. And then surveys. You have hundreds of users using Tableau. You might have thousands of users using Tableau. And if you don't know what help they need, the only way you can get to it is to do an end-user survey. Reach out to them and say, hey, we manage the community. We'd love to know, are you getting value? Are you getting the right training? What help do you need? And so we're seeing more and more customers now send out those end-user surveys. Obviously, the response rates are different. We've had customers try many different ways to jack up the response rates. Some of them use executives to send it down, saying, hey, we have all these licenses. We want to make sure you're getting the right support. Fill it out. Some of them, stagger it. So there are various ways to do it. But what stands out for me here, and I'll start talking about some of the challenges you're going to face, is doing this requires you to be a marketing person. This is a marketing job. And it's not something we are all very skilled at doing. And we look at it and say, okay, are we experts at this? But fact of the matter is, if you have a community and you're providing a service, you need to start collecting information about that community. So the last then metric comes to value. And this is the part where we feel a lot of our customers have the most challenge. The question I always get from people is, how do I go convince my executives to fund more training? How do I get them to fund having a dedicated community administrator to manage this community? I'm doing it out of my free time. And it's a good question because IT typically does not have budget for doing this stuff. So where will the money come from? And what we've noticed is that the teams that are getting value are on the business side. So how do you make that argument to business or executives to invest in this? And so how many of you have actually document use cases around this group is using Tableau, and this is their use case, and this is the value they got? Anybody does that today? Some of you. And again, it's not something we think about doing, but it's very important because if you cannot document those use cases, how are you going to go convince an executive to go invest more in enablement and training and providing more resources, or just to say, hey, free up my time to go do this? So we're now seeing more and more customers who will create use cases. One of our customers actually went and their COE lead sat down and talked to all the business groups that were using Tableau, documented the use case. They used a simple format, photograph of a person, some kind of demonstration, a little snapshot of the viz, why they used Tableau, how they did it, what value they got, and then they created like a coffee table book. That's so when they would go to meetings with executives, they had this briefing book that they could give to an executive and say, look, this is the value that Tableau is providing. This is the value that analytics has provided to our organization. That's why we need to go invest in this. And So the use cases sometimes quantify the value, sometimes stay at a higher level of just saying, hey, we used it for supply chain analytics. The customers who are able to then take it to that next level, where they're able to say, this was the revenue generated, this was the cost savings, or this was the productivity that we gained, are able to then go make that case to an executive who's looking at it saying, why should I invest X more dollars in enablement? So this is very important because the one question almost invariably that comes up is, how do I get funding for this? And if you don't document the value, and if you're not able to quantify it, at least to some extent, chances are you are yet one more person going and asking for a pool of funds from a constrained budget. But having this information, and we are seeing this work, more and more customers, we have customers, and we've noticed, again, this requires finance skill sets. Again, talking about different skill sets, which is not something we are natural about, collecting the ROI, documenting the value. So the organizations where finance has funded Tableau are very good at it. They have a formal process. They'll go through an ROI post, the use case going public. Once they've launched their project in Tableau, they can go document that. So those are just some of the areas, and then I'm going to bring back Tim here to wrap up.
Thank you, Vic. All right, so hopefully a lot of good ideas, and I think to me, it's all about making your jobs easier, right? How can you go get more help for the limited resources that you have and the more activities that you want to run? So hopefully this has been beneficial. But in reality, hey, we're trying to figure this out as we go along as well. So any metrics that come to mind that we didn't cover that you think are important for what we're trying to do with our topic today? Yes?
What about just the market in general, general movement towards data analytics, and how those that don't engage tend to not do as well as those that do?
Right, so sharing some, I think the question is like, how do you use market analysis and how self-service analytics is becoming more and more prevalent and those organizations are doing better to help promote that? Is that? Yeah, so I mean, those are all great metrics. I mean, there's all sorts of Gartner reports out there that speak to that. And I think that is just yet more external ammunition, if you will, to go have those conversations. So I think that's a great one. Yes?
Building on that point, has Tableau ever considered doing a survey of all of us annually, talking about how Tableau impacts our organization? Essentially, you'd be creating a longitudinal data set that we could draw on and to make a sale and say, look, companies that use Tableau, they see this typical type of growth year over year. There's always kind of stories about desktop and server or server and then desktop. If you guys gather that data once a year, that's kind of the community groups can come to you and say, okay, what are other Tableau, not Gartner, not third party, but yeah, we're already in the club.
Right.
That information out.
Yeah, so just in summary, the question was, how can we leverage all of your stories collectively so you can then take that and use it for your own internal use case to do more interesting things? So yeah, I think, again, there's a number of, we would love that data. Don't kid. So obviously marketing has a lot of outreach efforts in that area to collect that information. We have our stories up on our website, obviously. But yeah, by all means, I can assure you, if you reach out to your account manager and say, hey, I want to talk about the value you're bringing to my organization, they will love to have that meeting. We would welcome that. Yeah, so in summary, the question was on what I referred to as the popularity contest. Who's creating content that has the most unique users as well as the number of server hits? I think the answer is going to be, and basically how do you drive even more analysis off of that? I think you'd probably have to go to what we call log shark analysis. So that's a more detailed logging. It's beyond Postgres, but it's tracking by click. And then you can get into more, well, they clicked on this quick filter, or they clicked on this action filter on the dashboard. It would probably require some log shark analytics off of those workbooks. It's kind of a log file reading shareware product that we put up on GitHub. So you can plug it against your current log files, but it gets into that little bit more finer grain of access questions. But yeah, it's a great one as well.
Talk about the database behind the scenes of tracking all these usage interactions. Is that available for Tableau Online as well?
Ooh. So the question is, for those who have on-premise Tableau server, you're familiar hopefully with the Postgres database that tracks all the activity. But if you're a Tableau Online, I know there's a number of server admin views they provide. I don't think they're going to allow direct access, just given the security requirements in a shared environment.
If we can get your card, we can talk to the Tableau Online team and
Yeah,
find
that's
out
that's a great one for Tableau Online customers. Yes, in the back, and we'll come up. Yep.
That's a server specific configuration, right?
Correct.
And if you look at the dashboard, the canned dashboard, is there a way that you can get more data so that you can know what you don't know right now?
Okay, so in summary for everyone, our Postgres database, that's what tracks all of our activity on the server. By default, it's 183 days of activity that we store. Probably don't recommend you go change that, right? It's a kind of an ERP type system. We want to make it as fast and efficient. So what some organizations do is they take that data and archive it and just move it. And then they union that information up so they have more historical view than 183 days. So that's one option from just a data strategy. And again, the custom views, yeah, you can just go Google Tableau Server custom views. You can download, there's a kind of a backdoor to download the ones you look at on the server. Or there's a plethora of ones out there that I have a link to here in a moment on the community where there's already some pre-built ones that you can leverage. Pardon me? Just Google custom Tableau server admin views, something along those lines. And I'll show you here in a moment where I've got all the links that are already posted up there. We had more metrics here.
Yeah, you talked about monitoring activity in the community, and there's a lot of gap in our insight into data of knowing when we had events and who attended. And I was pondering in the past, is there any capability to harness like Outlook or Exchange data and calendar information in Tableau? Have you heard of doing that? I've never really seen Exchange data taken out of Exchange and used for analysis.
I haven't seen that.
If someone, it drives me nuts because I do a lot of Outlook invites. So their calendars, which again is a great marketing tool because then at least it's on their calendar. And then inside that calendar invite is the registration page. So kind of a way to get people encouraged to sign up. I have tried 100 different ways to copy and paste just simply to give me a list of who declined, who's tentative, and who accepted. And Outlook does not make it easy. You do have the ability, if you go under tracking, you can say copy to clipboard. And for whatever reason, sometimes I get full email addresses, and then other times I get the business name, like Tim Nicknish, and not my email. So I did that just this week, and I was pulling my hair out because I'd get a third of the data. But yeah, yes?
Do you know, within Postgres, is there any plans to kind of beef up tracking of the complexity of extracts and the data prep? Because I'm thinking of a value play where if you can start showing how much data prep is being done to make the data more consumable, that would be a very good metric. You know, if that's, I know the data prep stuff is still kind of on the horizon, but is that, do you think any of that will end up being in Postgres that you'd be able to like then extract that out and say, look, we've saved you X number of hours every year because we've made the data so consumable, you don't have to go and join 15 things. We just publish the data set that has those joins already through. That kind of.
Right, so the question again is the ability to track published data sources within Tableau Server to say, hey, we've built these nice user-friendly data sets for you. You don't have to go figure out SQL, go through training, figure out joins and all that. And do we track that type of activity? I know there's nothing in there now. I don't know with Maestro coming out what kind of metadata we're going to be capturing from there and how that's going to relate or not relate. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, so
That'd be a great one.
just to add to that, one thing which Tableau is looking at is more telemetry in the product. So if you think about, and especially with Maestro and stuff like that, are people using certain flows? Are they using certain joins? So the more telemetry we build, like even into desktop, where we could say, are people using LODs? Are they using clustering? gives you valuable insight into these are my advanced users, these are my basic users. So,
And it comes back to value.
yes,
It shows
absolutely.
that you start turning ROI.
Yep. And so there's, obviously when you get to tracking that kind of user data, you get into privacy, PII information. And so do we do it anonymously so we can just aggregate and say, hey, across all our customer base, this is how they're using the product, versus, hey, you as the COE lead for your company, I can give you data about how your users are using. These are things being discussed, but nothing's formed yet.
Any other, and thank you so much. This is great interaction. So the question was, do we promote or use internal user groups?
Correct.
At Tableau?
Okay, are you seeing that across the industry?
Oh, yeah, so the question is there just a big uptick in user groups? I mean, absolutely. I mean, that, at least in our role, that's what we're trying to promote and encourage is customers to start doing that because, BI tools can get kind of complex, right? If you're talking SQL, we don't want people to deal with that, so you get into best practices and how to get them started, how to handhold them. And as I tell all my COE leads, like, you can't do this by yourself. You need to engage with the business, find champions there, because they're going to know the data, they're going to know the business problem, they're going to know the users who consume it. Those are the people who can truly go help, the exponential users who want to be able to consume that data. I hate to say it, but COE and IT groups challenge in that because they're just not close enough to the problem that people are trying to answer with Tableau. So the more help you can get from the business, the more successful you'll be. And user groups are a great way to do that.
Yeah, and there are, obviously, I think a lot of you know about the kind of city-specific user groups. There's a New York user group, and there's also, I don't know if there are industry-specific. I think we're starting to do more. But, obviously the user community for Tableau, and you guys are, kind of shining example of it coming to conference. That's been our strength.
We'll do one more before we wrap up. We're running tight.
So it's not a question, but you can talk about other metrics to track. One of the most useful things that I have done is find the people who are not using the views that I've created for them and ask them why.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because if I can go back to that person and they say, this doesn't work for me, this doesn't work for me, and I fix those people often become your champions. They go, oh my gosh, you're saving me 20 hours.
Yeah, I would call that the unpopularity contest. Who's creating content and no one's looking? Probably just as important as those who are looking. So that's a great point. Okay, so just kind of wrap up and call to action. Hopefully we've given you a lot of great ideas. And I think first of all, just figure out what adoption metrics are important to you, right? First of all, identify them and then start collecting that data, right? Whether it's working off your own server, your own customer portal, working with your Tableau account team, or generating your own through value and community metrics, but start collecting it and then act on it, right? Now you know, let's go provide a better service. Let's go help, let's go engage, let's go solicit more resources. And when you go to solicit resources, you have a really good conversation and a compelling argument because you're backed with all this great data as to why they should help. Engage with your community. So the first thing I say is, well, who is your community? Well, map your HR data. Every time I go, oh, that's too sensitive, I'm like, I don't even want it. Just do it so you know. You don't have to share it with us. We would love to see it because it's interesting to us as well, but go do it internally so you understand where your HR users are, and then you can engage, and then conducting surveys is another easy one to do. There's tons of free survey data out there. SharePoint has it built in, SurveyMonkey, JotForm, tons and tons of options out there. And then go promote yourself, right? You guys are providing a service. You know you're adding value. Let's collect that information. Let's share that with your executives so you can go get more help. But also just give yourself a pat on the back. Like, you're doing some phenomenal things, and Tableau is a great tool to help you even do that. So go promote that. And then, again, that'll help sponsor those executive conversations. So we've shared a lot of good ideas. I kind of gave a quick summary of the different views that I've built. Some of them are custom, meaning, hey, you go get the data, go build it yourself. But a couple of important links up here are on the community website. So those are server admin community. For you server admin folks, go subscribe to it. There's tons of great stuff up there. I just posted a few other ones. So the web, the phone, and a few other ones that you can go ahead and steal and leverage and point at your own Postgres and fire away. So some great, great stuff up there. And lastly, please give us some feedback. As you know, we love data. So give us some help on this session. Give us a survey feedback, and thank you so much. Great audience, great participation. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.